Technology is certainly changing much of how we live our lives. Journalism is not immune to those changes. Blogs, web-based news sites, and social media are shaking up the traditional model of what we do. Joining us now for more on those changes and their implications, in Arlington, Virginia via Skype, Tom Rosenstiel, Executive Director at the American Press Institute and co-editor of the New Ethics of Journalism. In Detroit, Michigan via Skype, Steve Buttrey, Digital Transformation Editor with Digital First Media and blogger at the Buttrey Diary. And here with us in studio, Doug Saunders, International Affairs columnist with the Globe and Mail. He's also the online opinion editor. Welcome to you all.
Great to be here.
Tom, let me begin with you. You and your co-editor, Kelly McBride of the Poynter Institute, recently put out a book about the roles and responsibilities of journalists called The New Ethics of Journalism, Principles for the 21st Century. Why do journalists need a guide like that now?
Well, every generation, in effect, creates its own journalism. And the Poynter Institute last looked at the core ethics of journalism in the early 1990s. I was part of an effort called the Committee of Concerned Journalists that looked at the ethics of journalism in the right around 2000. And so much has changed that you have to ask a couple of questions. First of all, even in 2000, journalism was largely the domain of professionals, and they mostly worked for organizations that were engaged specifically in journalism. Now, even in 15 years, technology has created the possibility that anyone can produce journalism at any given moment. And a lot of organizations that were once considered people that journalists covered, governments, political organizations, political activists, are creating their own journalism and trying to produce it directly for citizens. So what are the ethics of all of that? Earlier efforts hadn't really anticipated a lot of those possibilities. And so that's what the book really is about. And when everyone can publish, how do we know who to believe?
And as things change so vastly, is there a greater distrust now, Tom, of journalism and journalists now than there was a couple of decades ago?
Yes, there is, but that didn't begin with the internet. We saw the origins of the decline in trust about journalism really started in the 1980s. It's associated partly with decline in all kinds of institutions. But what was going on in the 1980s was the beginning of a proliferation of outlets. Our television went from 4 channels in most markets to 40. Now we're at 400. So it was really options, more outlets, more choices for consumers, which has only expanded. And then in the United States, adding to that was one of the political parties in particular, the Republican Party, began to actively denounce a lot of traditional journalism as being liberal or associated or more supportive of one party. That also, by the way, supported the advent of another new technology, which in the US was talk radio. As we deregulated radio, a lot of stations drifted toward a kind of political talk, a partisan talk, and a lot of those early talk radio hosts promoted themselves as an alternative to the liberalism of traditional media.
Doug, Tom says, you know, the distrust piece began long before the advent of the internet. So let me put it to you this way. Has the internet further contributed to the decline of the public's trust in journalism?
What the online world has done is shattered the idea of the professional journalist, which is really not such an old idea. It's basically a post-World War II idea, probably reached its peak during the Woodward and Bernstein years of the 70s, when this idea of a highly trained elite group of people who practiced this profession, as it got called, came into prevalence. And of course, we forget that journalism didn't start that way and didn't flourish that way. It's not a profession. It's not even really a craft. It's unskilled. It's best probably described as a reflex of citizenship. It's something that everybody should be doing. And that's how it did start. It was people's letters collected together. It was a citizen act. And the new technology has allowed us that. It's allowed us the things that were within those closed enclaves to be part of the public. I mean, we see it as being chaotic, and when a big news event happens and all sorts of stuff is going back and forth on Twitter and Facebook, most of which is false. Well, that's what happens inside newsrooms all along. We'd always have big events occur, and the wire services would put out a first version for internal use. It would be full of hearsay and falsehoods, and they do write-throughs every 10 minutes, and they would slowly improve the veracity of what was going on. And journalists would watch this within our caves as the bells went off on the wire machines.
But now the public is watching it.
Now this is something that everybody partakes in. Now everybody engages in this particular process, both in terms of engaging with breaking news events, but also breaking things. You can walk around and you can see something happen, and you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, and you are doing something no different from what a supposedly professional journalist is doing. You may not be doing it well, or you may be doing it very well indeed. It's meant that journalism has returned to being something that everybody does, and some people do well.
Okay, Steve. Many people, though, lump everyone into the same group, whether you're a citizen journalist, whether you're tweeting something that they interpret to be journalism, whether it's quote-unquote professional journalists. How can digital help restore that broken trust in what we do?
Well, I think we've got tools to help show our work, that we can link to the sources of our content, and people can see where we got our information, or if the information was obtained in an interview, we can videotape that interview and embed some video from that, or we can embed source documents. So that digital tools let us show a lot more depth and context and showing the sources of our work than in the confines of a printed page or a brief broadcast story.
I want to read something that Steve wrote on his blog last month. You know, the pillars of journalism, sort of going back, included truth and balance and objectivity. I just want to read a little bit about what you wrote, Steve. You wrote, "Don't confuse balance with truthfulness. Reporting the truth requires verifying facts and debunking falsehoods, not reporting them as equivalent." And Steve, you say under the principle of truthfulness in Tom's book, The New Ethics of Journalism, you say that there should be an additional point instructing journalists to not confuse balance with truthfulness and so on. Can you give us an example of where that's happened in journalism, where journalism has gone wrong because it didn't follow this idea?
Oh, sure. The political activists of any stripe, but I think Republicans, especially conservatives, the Tea Party is an excellent example in the States, do an excellent job of manipulating the media by putting out their side of the story, feeling like, okay, we'll get the other side of the story, but won't dig into the facts and say, okay, but this one isn't true. Climate science is an excellent example where they try to depict bogus science as falsely equivalent with actual science, and certainly the regurgitation of the Bush administration's false intelligence leading up to the war in Iraq was an example of that manipulation that really goes beyond the false balance to simply becoming a vehicle for false information.
Doug, do you see that here in Canada as well, this mistaking balance with truthfulness?
Yes, although that's not specifically an online phenomenon. And I think it happens in public life as well. There's an assumption that every assertion must have an equally valid counter-argument. And sometimes that's a little bit ridiculous. I mean, for a good example, recently, there was sort of urban myth that developed about vaccinations for your children. Some people came to believe that it was linked to autism. There were even some cranks on the fringes of pseudoscience who wrote things supporting this idea. it was not a valid counter-argument to the fact that vaccination is something that everybody should do. And the fact that it took off because some newspapers thought you should print these urban myths as if they were valid scientific points caused a situation where thousands of people don't vaccinate their children because they've believed a complete fallacy out there. And now we have outbreaks of measles that are killing children as a result of that. So you could say, because certain newspapers and television stations treated these things as two valid poles in the same debate, that the quest for balance, this sort of notion of the old days of professional journalism, actually resulted in deaths. We're killing people with our balance.
I want to change gears a little bit here and bring up some stats about the three of you as it pertains to Twitter. We'll see here that Tom, you're the one who tweets the least. You have about 350 tweets compared to Steve's 41,000. Doug's the champ on tweeting apparently because he's got about 52,000 as of this afternoon. Tom, given that you're the least active on Twitter, do you think it's essential to journalism at this point?
Yeah, actually, those numbers are interesting because I don't tweet a lot, but I'm on Twitter every day. It doesn't really count the hours logged. I find Twitter a spectacular platform, particularly for breaking news, but even just to first thing in the morning to sort of get good reads. But I run an organization, and for years I actually had a staff that tweeted for my organization, and I didn't tweet personally because of sort of values that the organization wanted to present. It was a different organization than I run now. So there are lots of ways to tweet and lots of ways to use Twitter, and even Dick Costello talks about how you tweet. It has a lot to do with the brand you're trying to project, and there are multiple ways of going about that. So I'm a much more active observer, listener, reader than I am tweeter on that medium.
Steve, what about you? How essential is Twitter to what you do and to journalism in general as you see it?
Well, you couldn't possibly cover breaking news effectively without being very active on Twitter, having some sources and some contacts, understanding how to search effectively on Twitter. So it's really important there. It's important, I think, as a live coverage tool. We're having many more of, our newsrooms are doing much more live tweeting of big events, routine events, breaking news, and those sorts of things. A lot of news organizations kind of go to a default setting of, okay, here's a good tool for distribution. So we put the links to our stories on Twitter, and that's absolutely something that we should do. But it's much more important, I think, as a reporting tool or engaging with the community, crowdsourcing something, asking a question, did anyone see this? Well, what are you experiencing? What are you seeing right now? So I think it's an incredibly useful tool. I've been in the news business for over 40 years, and it's the most useful tool for journalists that I've seen developed in that time, with the possible exception of the cell phone. But because you use Twitter on cell phone and because the public uses Twitter on cell phones, they add to each other's value. So, but it is at least as important as the cell phone.
Doug, last week you tweeted a lot about an incident that took place in the U.S. Tom Matses, who's the former director of the political group MoveOn.org, about a conversation he overheard, and then he tweeted about. Tell us about that. What happened there first?
This guy was seated on a train between Washington, D.C. and New York City, and he was some sort of activist, but for our intents and purposes, he was just an ordinary guy. And he realized that the person sitting in the seat in front of him was the former director of the National Security Administration, the U.S. spy agency that's been in so much trouble for allegedly bugging people's phones. And he realized that what this former NSA director was doing off-the-record, deep background interviews with major journalists from the United States' largest media organizations, basically pouring poison in the ear of Barack Obama.
In a public place, on a train.
Well, he was on a train. He was doing these deep background records as a former senior administration official, or something to that effect, saying that the White House is wrong. They're making mistakes. They're doing terrible things and so on. So this guy just live tweeted the whole conversation that he overheard, and of course this caused a controversy. Some people from traditional media backgrounds said, "Oh, well, this he shouldn't be doing this. He should be getting the other side or asking this guy's permission, etc."
You argue that he had an ethical duty.
He was doing basic fundamental journalism. If you see something of significant public value, and I would argue that the former director of a spy agency, the man responsible for that spy agency's controversial policies, if he is lobbying against the President of the United States using these channels, this piece of information is of great value to people. And I don't mind him presenting it in a way that's entertaining by tweeting every sentence. In fact, he ended the conversation by having the former NSA director, whose staff by this point had said, "Your cover's blown," pose for him in a photo. That's not something I would do, but I appreciate that sort of thing happening. It does not all have to be this cut and dried world. We've created this image of journalism over the years that it has to be this almost forensic task where you have to have well-cultivated sources, and you have to balance everything you do and so on. Well, you're just writing. You're telling a story. You're explaining things to people. Sitting on a train and hearing something interesting of great public significance, just say it. It's fine.
Tom, do you agree with that? That this was just old, traditional style reporting? Overhear something that's interesting, send it out, tell the world about it, tell the Twitterverse about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a raw ingredient quality to a tweet that you don't have in a story that you spend weeks or even hours on. But absolutely, that's journalism at its essence. You find things out and you make them public. Now, journalism also involves editing, making choices, verifying. It was interesting, the conversation we had before about whether balance, how balance is a technique that to try and make things accurate, but it's very flawed. The problem of balance is, as Daniel said, predates the internet. The real essence of journalism at its best is verifying and contextualizing facts. So when you're tweeting one conversation, your context is much more limited, but gradually over time, we were able to get a lot more information about who was tweeting, and journalism and even truthfulness is what emerges. So it's not unlike the first story about a car accident has just a few facts to it, and 3 weeks later we find out that the curvature of that road and the failure of the lights cause a lot of accidents there. You have a lot more context and information, and problem solving really evolves over time. Truth in journalism is a process that comes out over time, over many pieces. So a handful of tweets begin that process wonderfully.
Steve, go ahead. I know you want to hop in here.
Sure. I would suspect that as limited as the live tweeting coverage would be, that was a better story than whatever story those journalists thought they were getting by being manipulated by somebody who was acting as a confidential source. I think we've gotten very careless and not very demanding before we grant confidentiality to sources. And this has nothing to do with technology. It's just more a culture that has developed of I get the scoop from this source who's spinning me, and I don't have much respect for that kind of journalism. The question I would have if I were in that situation to live tweet it, and this goes back to what Tom's point about verification, I'd have to be absolutely certain that this person is who I think it is before I would start live tweeting what was going on. But if I was certain that that person was doing it, I do a fair amount of train travel, and that's kind of a public forum. I've got no qualms with doing that, and in fact, to me, that's better, more ethical journalism than probably the sources that were talking to him, if they were just publishing what he said. Now, if they're using that for background to dig up good things and verify that, that's a different situation. But too many sources, too many journalists let sources manipulate them and take advantage of us.
I want to pick up on another thing that you've been saying, Stephen. It's one of your main complaints about Tom's book, about the new ethics of journalism, that it neglects talking about linking to articles and so on and so forth. Why is linking, in your opinion, such a critical issue?
Well, first of all, I should say Tom and Kelly did a fabulous job in developing those new guiding principles for the journalist. So I was talking about one thing that I wish they had done, but the principles themselves were a huge step forward from the excellent principles that were developed in the 90s, but they were for the 90s. But I do think that linking is a new form of attribution and of providing depth and context and transparency that helps us advance journalism. Now, obviously, you can't link on television, you can't link in print. You can post some URLs for people to look up, but linking is how digital media work, and digital journalists should use that tool and should use it aggressively. And there was an ethic, and I hesitate to use that word. There was a practice, and I shouldn't use past tense. There is a practice that we haven't stamped out fully yet, of not linking to the competition or not linking to send people off our site because we're going to, lose them from our site, when we had data that proved that they were leaving our site anyway. But we should provide depth and we should provide context as journalists, and we should attribute our sources, and links do all three of those things.
Doug, how do you see linking? Critically important?
It was. I think there was a period when blogs and linking were both very important. And it still is a great service for journalists to put a link to the thing you're talking about if it's something that's not obvious to find. I have to say that when I'm wearing my editor hat, I spend a certain amount of time taking links out of people's pieces, because there's a tendency for a lot of journalists when writing online to put a link on every noun and every other sentence, and it actually makes it unpleasant to read and creates, and it's unnecessary with modern technology. Because these days, if it's something that's widely published or that's in a major media organization, the phrase that you're using, nowadays if you just hover above a bunch of text on an article, your browser will find the thing, even if there's not an explicit link to it. So linking's useful, but really what you're talking about is a form of etiquette where you acknowledge what the competition's doing. I find tweeting the competition is a good practice as well. I think it's very important to let my readers know when the other newspapers and media outlets have something good, even something that's beaten us to the story. Partly for a very selfish and sneaky reason, which is that if I tweet the competition, they'll tweet me, and their readers will become aware of me and will join my audience. It's good to have people on. It's much like if you're running for office for the Conservative Party, you want to get Liberals to vote for you. Well, if you're writing for the Globe and Mail, you want to get National Post and Toronto Star readers to start following you. So tweet, but also because it's one of the techniques that works well. I'm not going to call this ethics or anything like that, but a technique that does work well in writing and anything else is to acknowledge that other voices exist. I think that predates the internet. I think good journalism has always acknowledged other people's work and other people's scoops, and it makes it seem more interesting as well. You sound like a bit of a propagandist if you write newspaper columns and articles with this sort of vacuum assumption that other media outlets don't exist. And there's a style of writing that did become popular for a while where newspapers didn't want to acknowledge each other's existence, even when the other guy had a huge scoop that was the only thing anyone's talking about. The social media world has changed that. It means that if the Toronto Star has a huge scoop about Rob Ford, the mayor of Toronto, just hypothetically, that everybody in the entire country and continent is talking about. We can't pretend that they didn't do that. We write articles about the fact that they did that. We tweet it, we acknowledge it, we give them their credit. Hopefully, at such time as we get those sort of things, they do the same for us.
All right. Steve, the Globe and Mail's editorial code of conduct states that, and I'll just read this, staff should be aware that passing along information through links or otherwise could be seen as approval or endorsement of that information by the Globe and Mail. Care should be taken. Well, Steve, that doesn't sound much like the enthusiastic endorsement of linking that you'd like to see, does it?
No, it certainly doesn't, and I'll differ with Doug on this point. Nothing in my endorsement of linking as a critical piece of journalism ethics today has anything to do with etiquette. We link for the reader. We provide relevant links that provide depth, context, and attribution. He's right. If you're linking every other word, that's not all your sources. That's not all providing depth and context. But relevant links help the reader understand where you got your information. And going to the Globe and Mail's code of conduct there, if you shouldn't be using that information if you're not confident in it, and if you're confident in it, you shouldn't have any problem linking to it. And that's not an endorsement. That's a silly notion that doesn't reflect really an understanding of how people use the web.
If I could just speak to that particular bit of language, that is not there in the code of conduct because it's a desirable code of conduct. That's strictly legalese. There have been court rulings which have suggested that under certain circumstances, although this has been limited down quite a bit, that links can be construed as endorsements. If you mention a politician as being disreputable and you attach a link on his name to Cocaine Anonymous, it can be construed as suggesting to readers that that politician has a cocaine problem, and you could get in trouble in court for that. So you do have to be careful in that sense that links are not devoid of meaning. That's what that code of conduct refers to.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Steve and I agree on most things, but when you're writing a book about overarching principles, it's important not to confuse routines and techniques with concepts. The concepts that you're trying to get across is humility, transparency, connection to community. Links are a technique that are very useful, but as Doug points out, the technology is going to change. And it's important to get at the idea that you want to be transparent, you want to acknowledge, you want to show your work. These are concepts that are going to endure. If you get too confused or you get too linked to a particular kind of practice, you build in a kind of conservatism in your notions of journalism that make it harder to evolve. Because you say, oh no, our principle is the inverted pyramid, or our principle is ink on paper. So it's very important to stay at an elevation here where people get the idea of what is the value of linking, not the act of linking itself.
All right, I want to raise one more thing that actually Steve raised on his blog. And that Steve said that in terms of workflow, where journalists are all doing a bunch of things now, we're not all just writing for a newspaper, we're writing for the newspaper and online and shooting video and all those things. Steve says that in the workflow for reporters and journalists, and that the digital should come first, print or broadcast should follow. Steve, kick this off. What are the advantages of the digital first approach?
Well, digital is always on. Television has broadcast newscasts at set times. The newspaper comes out once a day, but you can send your news out as soon as it's verified. Clearly, it has to be verified. We don't change our standard of verification and accuracy. But as soon as we have news ready to publish, we have a platform that people are on right now, that people have set up to alert them when things that they're interested in are happening. And so we should be tweeting it. We should be putting it on Facebook. We should be putting it on our websites and apps and text alerts and whatever digital tools that we have, because that's where the audience is, and that's where the future is. That's where the audience is going to grow and the opportunity is going to grow.
Doug, go first digital?
I think yes, but let's not make people think that this means we are going to be pat or fast-paced or lose the larger context and meaning. This digital-first fact, and look, this is the reality. I mean, look, two of the most respected newspapers in Britain, the Guardian and the Financial Times, have switched to models where all the senior editors commit themselves only to the online product, and you have a junior secondary staff who put out the print newspaper later on based on that product, and we're all moving to that model. I think a lot of people say, my God, this is going to be a shift to superficiality. It's going to be surface engagement. It's going to be people tweeting what they see moment by moment, and we're going to lose that depth. Well, keep in mind, one of the things that's happened as a consequence of this shift to digital first is that there's been a huge new appetite for very long analytical essays of the 6,000 word length. That appetite was created by Twitter. Twitter has created a market for very long essays that did not exist before. People think it's a 140 character medium. It must be about people's lunch. It's the long reads hashtag, which millions of people follow, has caused newspapers and magazines to start running long essays once again. It's caused a renaissance of the long essay.
Okay, let me put this to Tom, though. If, as Doug says, this isn't about cheap and cheerful journalism, only digital. There are people who would argue, though, that with the speed that reporters are working at getting the stuff off the digital list, that we're losing things like careful and slow fact-checking because we're so scared of getting scooped by the public or someone posting something on Twitter. Is that a concern of yours?
Yeah, I think the concept that I like to use is platform orthodox. Every platform has inherent strengths and weaknesses. And certain biases that are built in. If we think of this as digital first, and that means that we begin to think of the website, that limits us. The way that we work on mobile phones and what works well there and when people use them is a little different than how people use tablets and when they're most inclined to sit down with a tablet. The 30-minute newscast has virtues that you don't have when the content is atomized into separate segments. So it's important to I think about what's the best, what's the potential of each platform, each form, and how do we exploit that? One of the problems I think with digital first, not the company, but it's just using that concept, is people begin to think, okay, our website is first. And then when in fact it may be, given on the time of day and the nature of the content, that your mobile phone is first. And what is this going to mean when we're now going to start getting this technology on a phone, on a watch, or on our glasses or wearable technology? Digital is going to change again. So I think we need to think about the platform. And by the way, for if you're the New Yorker magazine, that platform may actually still be print.
We just have a couple of minutes left. I just want to ask you, each of you, to comment on this. Steve, I'll start with you. The evolution of journalism happening rapidly, but a year from now, what conversation are we going to be happening about where we are as journalists and where our industry's at?
I wish I knew. I think Tom's mention of the glasses. I think wearable watches, glasses will certainly be something that we want to watch. I think evolution is exactly the right word here. We're talking about species being able to adapt in order to survive, and survival of the fittest means that those of us who don't adapt, whether it's wearables, whether it's a different technology that I can't anticipate, we have to figure out how those things can be used well for journalism and how we can build a business around them that can support good journalism.
Tom, what do you think? What are the ethics we need to keep in mind with the changes that we're going to see ahead?
Well, I think they are very human. Tell the truth, acknowledge what you don't know, explain your motives so that people can trust you. There's a lot of EQ to good journalism as well as IQ.
Doug, as you were saying, we were talking about at the beginning of the program, you're the new online opinion editor at the Globe. So take us forward. A year from now, 2 years from now, where are we going to see the evolution of journalism in terms of the digital world?
I think there was an initial flourish in online journalism in this belief that you needed to attract the most people possible with cat videos and things like this. And I think there's now an understanding that more than ever before, more than during the heyday of newspapers, the thing that works is having some expertise and some knowledge that nobody else has, that people are willing to pay a premium to get because you can provide the type of people, the type of knowledge that you can't get anywhere else.
All right, I want to thank all three of you. I expect you all to tweet that you're on the program today and link to it as well.
Already have.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Tom Rosensteel, Stephen Buttrey, Doug Saunders. Thank you all for being here.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.